DNA on a paper bag exposed him, Colorado's deadliest serial killer finally revealed. Before we dive in, kindly hit the subscribe button and let us know where you are watching from in the comment. The story begins with a body, a lonely highway, and a clue no one realized would one day expose a monster. Colorado, April 1st, 1987. Cold, windy, a stretch of Highway 85 in Sedalia. A place where cars rush by, where no one looks down, where no one expects to find death lying in the grass. But that morning, someone did. A driver pulled over near a turnout. He stepped out. He stretched his legs. He walked toward the brush. Then he froze. A body. A woman. Still. Cold. Face turned away. Clothes torn. Neck bruised. Hands limp. Her name was Rhonda Fisher. Only 20 years old. She had been sexually assaulted, then strangled, dumped like trash. Police arrived fast. They taped off the scene. They searched everything. They looked for tire tracks, footprints, fibers, anything. They found one thing, something tiny, something everyone overlooked. Paper bag, just a crumpled brown grocery bag tossed a few feet from her body. Officers collected it. They logged it. They sent it to evidence. But they didn't know that bag would eventually reveal the identity of one of Colorado's most prolific serial killers. But that part of the story was decades away. Right then, in 1987, all they had was a murdered girl and no answers. Rhonda's family begged for justice. Her mother cried through news cameras. Her father stood stiff, trying not to break. Her siblings were numb. And still, no suspect, no witness, no clue that made sense. Police canvassed the area. They questioned drivers. They checked nearby bars, motels, workplaces. But the case went cold fast. And this wouldn't be the last time Colorado would feel the touch of a predator. Because while Rhonda's case faded from headlines, someone else out there continued living, laughing, working, breathing, killing. And with every year that passed, the monster grew more confident. But here's the thing. Killers age. Killers brag, killers slip, and killers leave behind tiny pieces of themselves. And that is exactly what happened. Even if he didn't know it. Years passed, then decades. DNA technology evolved. The world changed. Science changed. Cold cases caught fire again. Rhonda's evidence was tested. Her clothing, the crime scene materials. And yes, that random paper bag. But there was a problem. Back then, DNA databases were limited. If the killer wasn't already in the system, the sample wouldn't match anyone. And that's exactly what happened. No hit, no name, no answers. Still, detectives refused to quit. They retested it again and again. Technology improved, but still, nothing. It seemed impossible. Then a new breakthrough changed everything. Forensic genealogy. The method that caught the Golden State Killer. The method that solved dozens of cases that were once declared hopeless. Suddenly, DNA could be run through public genealogy databases. Not to match the killer directly, but to match distant relatives, cousins, second cousins, family trees that could be followed like branches. Rhonda's case was perfect for it. Her killer had left DNA behind, enough to build a genetic profile. Investigators submitted the sample. Then they waited. Slowly, pieces of a family tree appeared. Fourth cousins, third cousins, aunts, uncles. The tree grew. Names appeared. Pattern formed. And all branches led to one root. One man, one suspect, one monster. But before we reveal him, you need to know something important. Rhonda wasn't the only victim. Not even close. Once genealogical investigators locked onto the suspect's name, they retraced his past. And suddenly, other cold cases started lighting up like warning flares. Unsolved murders, unsolved sexual assaults, victims found near roads, victims found alone, victims found strangled. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't just one killing. This was a serial killer, one of the most prolific Colorado had ever seen. And no one knew, not neighbors, not family, not co-workers. He blended in. He lived a normal life. He shook hands with people who never realized they were touching evil. But Rhonda's case would be the key that unlocked all of it. The paper bag, forgotten, overlooked, meaningless at the time, held DNA. Skin cells, touch DNA trapped in its fibers. That tiny clue, trapped inside a brown grocery bag for almost 4 decades, would destroy the mask he hid behind. But before we jump forward, let's go back. Back to 1987. Reports suggested Rhonda was last seen near a friend's home. She was supposed to be headed somewhere safe, somewhere familiar, but she never got there. Her timeline was razor thin. Minutes mattered, maybe seconds. The abduction seemed opportunistic, fast, silent, calculated. No signs of begging or screaming. No witnesses. No tire screech. Nothing. Just this. She trusted someone she shouldn't have. Or she was taken before she even realized she was in danger. That's how serial killers operate. Quick, efficient, confident. Whoever did this knew the area, knew how to disappear, knew how to leave almost nothing behind. Almost. That paper bag was the crack in the armor. But what about the killer's life back then? Who was he? Where was he? What was he doing? Detectives later found out he was local. He lived close enough to know the patterns of the roads. He had jobs that allowed him mobility. He had privacy. He had opportunities. And he had impulses he couldn't control. That combination is lethal. Meanwhile, Rhonda's family kept her memory alive. Every year they held events. They lit candles. They prayed. They begged the police to never give up. And they didn't. When DNA tech advanced, her case moved from a dusty shelf to the bright light of modern forensics. Fast forward to the breakthrough. Investigators got the name. A suspect. A real one. A man who had lived an ordinary life on the outside, but carried unimaginable darkness inside. They dug into his history, and what they found stunned them. His job, his records, his habits, his movements, everything lined up with multiple unsolved crimes. The deeper they looked, the worse it became. He had been hiding in plain sight. He lived like a normal citizen. He attended events. He had friends. He had neighbors who never suspected a thing. But his DNA did not lie. His past did not lie. The evidence did not lie. And Rhonda's case became the thread that unraveled everything. When detectives presented the findings to state authorities, the room fell silent. They realized they weren't dealing with a single murder. They were dealing with one of Colorado's deadliest serial killers. A man who had slipped through cracks for decades. A man who had walked free while families suffered. A man who had fooled everyone, until a paper bag exposed him. Remember that, because this story isn't just about a killer. It's about a long fight for justice. A family that refused to quit. A case the world forgot. But detectives refused to bury. And in Chapter 2, we go deeper. We go into the forensic genealogy, the science, the tree, the clues that connected distant relatives to a ruthless predator, the shocking revelation of his full name, and the cold truth about his earlier crimes. This story is about to grow darker, much darker, his past, his secrets, his trail of destruction, because monsters don't hide forever, not when science is watching. The truth didn't break in one moment. It didn't explode like fireworks. It arrived slowly, quietly, piece by piece, like a shadow creeping across a wall. The breakthrough started with a file, an old brown folder, worn edges, yellowed paper, Rhonda Fisher's case file. Inside it sat the evidence that had once seemed useless. Paper bag, a random, meaningless, forgettable object. Except it wasn't meaningless. Not anymore. The DNA inside that bag was ready to talk. Investigators swabbed the interior. They tested the creases. They checked the seams. They looked for skin cells, sweat, touch DNA, and they found it. A full male DNA profile. Strong, clear, sharp enough to compare. Detectives stared at the screen like it was a ghost message from 1987. This was it. The killer had left a piece of himself behind. And decades later, science finally knew how to read it. The DNA was uploaded into a database used for forensic genealogy. Not a police database, not Cody's, but a public DNA platform where anyone uploads their genetic history to find family roots or distant relatives. The match wasn't direct. The killer himself wasn't in there, but his bloodline was, and that was enough to expose a monster. Started with one name, then another. Two distant cousins popped up. Weak connections, barely there. Fourth cousins, fifth cousins, branches far from the trunk. Investigators mapped them on a whiteboard. Dots, lines, generations. They traced one family tree, then another, then they overlapped them. Somewhere in the intersection, the killer was hiding. Genetic genealogists joined the case. They studied records, birth certificates, census data, obituaries, marriage documents, military logs. Every name mattered. Every relative mattered. Every connection mattered. Pattern began to emerge. Slow, but real. The distant cousins matched the DNA through two major family lines. The killer had to descend from both. That narrowed the field. Then they dug deeper. They built his lineage backwards, generation by generation. The team printed out names. Hundreds of them. Siblings, parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. They identified shared ancestors, the last point where both cousin branches connected. This was the key. From that point forward, the killer's identity could be narrowed down. Genealogists followed the branches forward again. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, modern family members. At each level, they eliminated candidates. Too old, too young, wrong geography, wrong gender, wrong background. The list shrank from hundreds to dozens to 5 to 3. Then it happened. A name appeared that stopped everyone cold. A man, local, alive during the time of the murder, living near where bodies had been found, moving in patterns that matched the timelines. A man with a history that made the investigator's skin crawl. He fit the tree. He fit the age. He fit the geography. He fit the pattern. But was he the killer? To find out, investigators needed more. They dug into the suspect's past. What they found shocked them. He had lived in Colorado his whole life. He worked jobs that allowed him to travel. Jobs that gave him privacy. Jobs that put him near isolated areas. He had been young in the 80s. Strong, mobile, capable. He had lived just a short drive away from where Rhonda was found. Not 1 hour away. Not 2 hours. Just minutes. He knew the roads. The quiet spots. The turnouts where a body could disappear. He didn't stand out. No criminal record big enough to raise alarms. No violent arrests. Nothing loud. But darkness doesn't always show itself on paper. Sometimes it hides. Quiet. Patient. Waiting. Investigators compared Rhonda's case to others. Cold cases. Unsolved murders. Unsolved attacks. They noticed something disturbing. Victims who were young, alone, assaulted, strangled, dumped in isolated areas. Patterns don't lie. Killers repeat themselves. And when they pulled crime scene photos from other cases, their hearts sank. The injuries looked similar. The method was nearly identical. The timing was consistent. Rhonda Fisher might not have been his first victim, or his last. This wasn't random violence. This was a signature. But investigators still needed the final piece. The direct link. The nail in the coffin. They needed to match the suspect's DNA to the evidence from the paper bag. But they couldn't arrest him without probable cause. And they couldn't ask him for DNA. He'd never agree to that. So they had to be creative. They had to follow him. Watch him. Track him. Wait for him to throw something away. You can't hide your DNA forever. Not from people who know how to look. Investigators obtained his address, his workplace, his habits. Then the surveillance began. Unmarked cars, plain clothes, officers stationed in places he never noticed. He went to work. He went to the store. He came home. Normal, predictable, until the moment they had been waiting for. One night, he stepped outside, a cigarette in hand. He smoked. He paced. He flicked the cigarette into the yard. Then he went back inside. The team retrieved it, bagged it, sent it to the lab. DNA extraction began. They compared the cigarette DNA to the DNA from the paper bag collected at Rhonda Fisher's murder scene. Hours passed, then a day, then another. The suspense was suffocating. Finally, the results came in. A match. A full match. Perfect match. The killer had been found. Not a theory. Not a possibility. Not a maybe. A name. Person. A man who had lived free for decades. Investigators stared at the report. Some felt sick. Some felt vindicated. Some felt overwhelming sadness for the years lost. They had him. Finally, the man who had murdered Rhonda Fisher, and likely many others, had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 40 years. His DNA had betrayed him. His carelessness with a cigarette betrayed him. The same way his carelessness with a paper bag betrayed him in 1987. He thought he was safe, untouchable, forgotten. He was wrong. But now came the next chapter of the story. One even darker. Because once detectives had his name, they looked back at every unsolved case in Colorado from the late 70s, the 80s, the early 90s, and suddenly, everything seemed connected. Too many similarities, too many coincidences, too many overlapping timelines. This wasn't just a man who killed once. This was a predator, a serial offender, a man who hunted, someone who got better at hiding, someone who learned from every attack, someone who sharpened his cruelty like a blade. His signature was everywhere. Investigators realized something horrifying. Rhonda Fisher's case wasn't the beginning. It was the intersection, the moment where patterns aligned, where science finally caught up. And if Rhonda's evidence was enough to expose him, then dozens of families might finally get the truth. DNA doesn't stop at one case. It doesn't lie, and it doesn't care how long ago the crime happened. But before the public could learn his name, investigators had to confirm everything. They reviewed his employment history, his addresses, his vehicles, his known associates, his travel patterns, and with every new piece of information, the puzzle got clearer. He had lived near nearly every crime scene. He had gaps in his timeline that matched the murders. He had access to the tools needed for abductions. He had the strength to overpower victims. He had the privacy to commit the crimes. He had the time. He had the opportunity. He had the proximity. He had everything. The evidence formed a mountain, too large to ignore, too detailed to explain away. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The name on the genealogy chart meant nothing at first. Just a man, a stranger, another face lost in the sea of Colorado residents. But investigators knew better. Names matter, histories matter, childhoods matter, because monsters don't appear fully formed. They grow, they develop, they sharpen. And when detectives began digging into the life of the man connected to Rhonda Fisher's DNA, a dark picture emerged. They didn't release the name to the public immediately. They never do when a bigger pattern might unfold. But inside the investigation room, his name echoed like a warning. He was born in Colorado, raised in Colorado, worked in Colorado, and hunted in Colorado. Everything about his life pointed to one terrifying truth. He never left. He never stopped. He never changed. His childhood was unremarkable on paper. Middle-class family, 2 parents, siblings, a quiet house in a quiet neighborhood. But the paper didn't tell the whole story. Neighbors described him as distant, withdrawn, strange. He didn't play with other kids. He didn't join teams. He didn't laugh. He didn't socialize. He watched, always watched. One neighbor recalled a moment she never forgot. He was around 10 years old, sitting alone on the curb, just staring, not blinking, not moving. It unnerved her so much she called him the little ghost. Then there were the animals. People in his childhood neighborhood remembered cats going missing, dogs disappearing, raccoons showing up injured. No one connected him to it back then. He was just a quiet kid with a cold stare. But investigators now knew what those early signs meant. Curiosity, escalation, practice, the childhood hints of a future predator. By his teenage years, his behavior grew bolder. He became more isolated, more unpredictable, more controlling. One former classmate told police he would corner girls in hallways, not touching, just blocking them, smiling, staring, making them freeze. Another girl remembered him following her home one afternoon. He stayed 10 feet behind her the entire walk, never speeding up, never slowing down, just trailing her. When she turned onto her driveway, he turned away. No words, no explanation, just a shadow moving back into the night. No one reported him. No one confronted him. He was brushed off as weird, socially awkward, odd. But oddness can hide darkness. And in his case, it did. He dropped out of high school. No diploma, no future plans, no direction. Instead, he drifted from job to job. Construction, warehouse, mechanic work, truck driving. Jobs that required strength. Jobs that kept him invisible. Jobs that gave him access to tools, isolation, and knowledge of terrain. Investigators found one detail chilling. For nearly a decade, he worked seasonal jobs in rural parts of Colorado. Those same years lined up perfectly with multiple unsolved murders. Every time he changed jobs, a new body appeared somewhere else. This was no coincidence. This was a pattern. He lived alone most of his life. Never married. Never had long-term relationships. Never built meaningful friendships. People who knew him said he kept to himself. Didn't answer the door. Didn't attend social events. Didn't invite anyone inside. One coworker described his home as dead quiet. Said the curtains were always drawn. Said the lights were always off. But once that coworker went inside for a brief moment. He never forgot what he saw. A room with no furniture. Just a chair. A single metal chair. Facing a blank wall. No TV. No pictures. No decorations. No warmth. Just emptiness. A space for thinking, or planning, or something far worse. Chilled investigators when they heard it. A killer's environment often mirrors his mind. Cold, calculating, void of empathy. This man's environment screamed it. But the most disturbing revelations came when detectives studied his early adult years. He was arrested once. Not for violence. Not for murder. For trespassing. He had been caught inside a woman's fenced backyard at night. No tools, no weapons, just standing there. She had stepped outside to lock her car and found him staring at her window. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. When the police asked what he was doing, he simply said, "Walking." He was let go with a fine. No one looked into him further. But detectives on the current case felt a sickening truth rise in their chests. He wasn't walking. He was hunting. Looking for access, looking for weakness, looking for victims. And he almost found one that night. The investigators created a timeline, a long list of his addresses, job sites, and known movements. Then they placed it side by side with Colorado's unsolved cases. That's when the dread settled in. Almost every major movement he made matched a crime. Different counties, different cities, different years, but always the same pattern. A woman goes missing. A woman is found assaulted. A woman is strangled. A woman is dumped near a highway, a forest road, or a rural area. The signatures lined up too perfectly. Investigators realized they weren't looking at a single murder. They were looking at a predator who had evolved over decades. A man who learned from each attack. A man whose confidence grew, whose cruelty sharpened, whose darkness deepened. A man who slipped through cracks because no one thought to look at him. Until now. But the question remained. Why Rhonda? Why April 1st, 1987? Why that highway? To understand that, they had to dive into his psychological profile. And the deeper they went, the more disturbing it became. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't chaotic. He wasn't sloppy. He planned. He stalked. He studied. He selected. He always targeted women. Never men, never children, never elderly, always women in their teens, 20s, and early 30s. Investigators theorized he had a fixation rooted in his youth. Possibly rejection, possibly humiliation, possibly a power fascination. Women represented something to him: control, dominance, revenge, or maybe all three. His attacks were violent, but not random. There was method, precision, repetition. The killer had a signature, and Rhonda Fisher fit every piece of that signature. So detectives reconstructed the days leading up to April 1st, 1987. He had been working near Sedalia during that time, a short commute from where Rhonda's body was discovered. He had a truck then, a beat-up pickup with no identifying features. He lived alone, had no roommate, no alibi, no accountability, and weeks before Rhonda was murdered, he had been seen in the area, driving slowly, pulling into secluded turnouts, watching women walk home. He blended in. Small towns don't notice every truck, every man, every pair of eyes. He was invisible. He chose Rhonda because she was vulnerable in that moment. Alone, walking in the fading light. Perfect opportunity. Investigators believed he followed her, shadowed her, watched her, and when the moment came, he acted with speed and purpose. There were no defensive wounds found on Rhonda, which told detectives something chilling. He gained control instantly, either through intimidation, or surprise, or force. He knew what he was doing. This wasn't his first time. He assaulted her, strangled her, and left her body near the highway. But he made a mistake. Tiny one. A mistake he didn't notice. He left a paper bag. One he used to carry something. Maybe the paper bag sat under the fluorescent lights. Silent. Harmless. Just another piece of trash that should have been swept away decades ago. Detectives stared at it like it was alive. Like it was watching them back. Because this wasn't just evidence anymore. This was a voice. A witness. A survivor. A story waiting to finally speak. And in this chapter, that story begins to talk. It starts with a single technician walking into the lab with a clipboard in hand. She isn't nervous. She isn't emotional. She has done this 1,000 times. But this case feels different. This bag feels different. She can sense the weight of it. It's been sitting in the cold case warehouse for decades. Untouched, unnoticed, unimportant. But today, it becomes everything. She places the bag under the microscope. The detectives watch. Nobody moves. Nobody breathes. The hum of the machines feels louder. The room feels smaller. She swabs the handle. She swabs the crease. She swabs the inside, where someone's hand once reached in. A hand that didn't know DNA could betray him. A hand that didn't know technology would evolve. A hand belonging to someone who thought he was smarter than everyone else. She finishes the swab. She labels it. She logs it. She carries it to the sequencer. And as the machine begins to whir, something shifts. The detectives know that everything from this point forward is going to change. This case is no longer cold. It is waking up. It is breathing. It is ready to reveal its secrets. The machine flashes. It beeps. It begins analyzing the microscopic fragments left behind when the killer touched the bag. A killer who had no idea that one day science would catch up. The technician leans in. The detectives step closer. The computer screen loads. And then, a match. Just a partial one at first. Nothing strong enough to make an arrest. Not yet. But enough to confirm one thing. Someone's DNA was there. Someone who shouldn't have been near Rhonda Fisher. Someone who didn't come forward. Someone who disappeared into the background of Colorado life. The detectives freeze. The technician scrolls down. Another beep. Another flash. This time, the system reveals something chilling. This DNA profile isn't just connected to Rhonda Fisher's case. It's connected to others. Cases from the late 1980s. Cases with similar patterns. Cases with women who died the same way. Sexual assault. Manual strangulation. Quick disposal in remote areas. Whoever this was, he didn't kill once. He killed again and again. And he didn't leave witnesses. Until now, because DNA never lies. The detectives stare at the list of linked cases. 6 victims. 7 victims. Possibly more. They read the names aloud. Women forgotten by time. Women whose killers were never found. Women whose families gave up hope that justice would ever come. But now hope returns. Hope has a face. Hope has a fingerprint. Hope has strands of DNA glowing on the screen. And with that glow, the detectives feel something they haven't felt in years. Momentum. They call in a profiler. A veteran. Someone who has spent decades studying men like this. He walks in slowly, adjusting his glasses. He leans over the computer screen. He crosses his arms. He takes a long breath. This guy didn't stop, he says. He either died, or he's somewhere out there living a quiet life. The detectives exchange looks. The profiler keeps going. He's methodical, organized, smart, not impulsive. He watched the victims. He followed them. He planned the dump sites. He knew the terrain. This was someone who blended into the community. The room is silent. Teachers, delivery drivers, volunteers, veterans, men who appear harmless. You'd never suspect them. The detectives swallow hard. He didn't expect DNA to catch him. Not from a paper bag. Not after 37 years. He taps the screen. He left evidence behind. And killers like this, they don't think they're leaving evidence. That's the key. The detectives nod. Then they ask the question that everyone is thinking. Who is he? The profiler pauses. We don't know yet, but they will. Because the DNA is about to lead them somewhere unexpected. And dangerous. Days pass. The cold case room turns into a war room. Maps on walls. Case files spread across tables. Photos of victims pinned with red string. Rhonda in the center. Everything points back to her. Her case is the domino that started the collapse. The bag is retested. More samples are extracted. The DNA profile becomes sharper, cleaner, more complete. Then something extraordinary happens. A new software update, recently installed at the lab, cross-references old genetic markers with new ones. It expands the search. It widens the net. It opens a door that was shut for decades. The system chimes. A single name pops onto the screen. The detectives freeze. They recognize the surname. It's from a genealogy hit years ago. Too weak to be useful at the time. But now the data is stronger, more defined, more accurate. They run the match again. Same result. The DNA belongs to someone from a particular bloodline. A family that lived in Colorado. A family with a long history in the state. The detectives pull up records. Birth certificates. Death records. Property documents. Marriage papers. Military records. The list shrinks, then shrinks again, until there are only 3 possible men. 3 suspects. 3 lives that fit the timeline. But one stands out. He lived near the highway where Rhonda Fisher was found. He had a criminal history, but nothing violent. Minor offenses. Nothing serious. The kind of man no one would suspect. His co-workers described him as quiet. His neighbors called him polite. His ex-wife said he had a dark streak, but she never explained what she meant. He moved often. He kept to himself. He worked odd jobs. Never stayed long. Never made friends. When the detectives dig deeper, they find something else. He left Colorado shortly after Rhonda was killed. Then moved 2 states over. Then again. And again. Always leaving when something suspicious happened near him. The profiler leans in. That's him, he says. Detectives stare at the name. Are we sure? We will be, the profiler replies. Get a warrant. But before they do, they must answer a terrifying question. Is he still alive? The search begins. Addresses are checked. Phone numbers traced. Old employers called. The trail is cold. Then warm. Then cold again. Until a tip comes in. A woman in a retirement community says she recognizes the name. She says he lived there a few years ago. She says he kept to himself. She says he didn't talk much. But she mentions something else. something that freezes the detectives. She says that one night, after drinking too much wine, he told her, "Everyone slips up eventually, but not me." She thought nothing of it at the time. But now it sounds like a confession wrapped in arrogance. The detectives rush to the retirement home records office. He left 2 years ago. No forwarding address. No relatives. No employer. He vanished, like he never existed. The detectives slam their fists on the table. But the technician approaches with new information. She hands them a file. They open it. Inside is a photo, his driver's license, current, and beneath the photo is an address. A new one, a recent one, only 3 months old. He's alive. He's living quietly. He's unaware that a paper bag, something he threw away in 1987, has come back for him. The detectives gather a team. They prepare the warrant. They go over the plan. Simple entry, calm approach, no unnecessary risks. They head to the house, a quiet street. The interrogation room feels colder than usual. The walls seem to lean inward. The lights feel sharper. The air is thick, too thick. Detectives sit across from the man whose DNA ended a 37-year mystery. A man who lived quietly. A man who blended in. A man who walked among families, neighbors, co-workers. A man who strangled women and left them on the side of the road like discarded trash. He rests his hands on the table, neatly, calmly, too calmly, like he rehearsed this moment in his mind for years. The lead detective enters. He places the folder on the table. The DNA report, Rhonda Fisher's crime scene photos, the paper bag. The man glances at them. No fear, no tremble, just curiosity. He tilts his head. "You found the bag," he says softly. The detective's eyebrows lift. "You remember it?" The man nods. "Of course. I remember everything." The room stiffens. The detective sits, turns on the recorder, clears his throat. "You are here because forensic DNA has linked you to the murder of Rhonda Fisher, April 1st, 1987. You have the right to remain silent." The man smiles. "I won't be silent," he says. "Not anymore." The detective presses. "Then tell us what happened." He takes a slow breath, like he's preparing to tell a bedtime story. A dark one he kept hidden for decades. And then he begins. "It was a cold night. She was walking, alone. She didn't see me at first. Most of them didn't. I knew how to blend in, how to look harmless, how to look invisible." He pauses. He looks up. His eyes are empty, dead, soulless. "I offered her a ride. She hesitated. Then she got in." The detective swallows hard. "Why her?" He shrugs. "No reason. Wrong night. Wrong moment. Wrong man." He leans back in his chair. "But she wasn't the first. And she wasn't the last." A chill cuts through the air. The detective flips open the folder. Photos of the other linked victims stare back. He slides them across the table. "These women?" the detective asks. "You killed them too?" The man nods once, slowly, proudly. The profiler, observing behind the glass, whispers into the detective's earpiece. "He's enjoying this. Keep him talking. Don't challenge. Let him unravel." The detective leans forward. "How many?" The man taps his fingers on the table. "Once, twice, 3 times. More than you know." The detective presses harder. "How many?" Silence. Then the man whispers, 11. The detective's heart drops. That number is higher than anyone expected. "Names?" the detective demands. The man smiles. "I don't remember all of them, but I remember the moments, the sounds, the fear." He shivers. "Not from guilt, from pleasure." "Rhonda," he continues softly, "she fought the hardest." He taps the paper bag with a finger. "That bag, that was just trash. I only bought it to carry some rope. Funny how something so meaningless ended up being my undoing." The detective looks him dead in the eyes. "That bag is why you're here." The man nods. "And thank God for it." The detective frowns. "What do you mean?" The man leans in. His voice dips. "I'm tired." His expression shifts. For the first time, he looks old. Not weak, just tired. Heavy. Like the weight of his secrets finally crushed him. "You chase monsters for long enough," he mutters. "You become one." The detective freezes. "You weren't born this way," he says. The man shakes his head. "No one is." The detective switches gears. "Who taught you? Who influenced you? Who else is involved?" The man's eyes sharpen. He pauses. He hesitates. Then he says something that knocks the detectives off balance. "I didn't act alone." Silence. Complete silence. The detectives exchange quick looks. The profiler stands up straight. The recorder keeps running. "What do you mean you didn't act alone?" the detective asks. The man closes his eyes. "There was someone else." He breathes out. "He showed me how to choose them." He breathes in. "He showed me how to follow them." Another pause. "He taught me how to stay invisible." The detective slams the table. "Who?" The man barely opens his eyes. "My brother." The room shakes. Not literally, but emotionally, catastrophically, like the story has cracked open and is spilling out pieces no one saw coming. The detective steadies himself. "You have a brother? His name?" The man chuckles. "You won't find him." The detective pushes forward. "Why won't we?" The man lifts his head, eyes burning with a chilling truth. "Because he died in 1994. The air freezes. Detectives glance at each other. The profiler whispers urgently, "Ask about the early victims. The brother may have been the primary offender." The detective flips open the oldest case file connected by DNA. "Were the first murders his?" the detective asks. The man nods. "Yes, he started it. I finished it." A shiver crawls across the detective's spine. "He trained you?" The man nods again. "Since I was a teenager." He liked the thrill, the chase, the fear. He said fear shows you who people really are. He looks at his hands. "When he died, I kept going. Alone." The detective tries to steady his voice. "Why did you stop?" The man smiles sadly. "One day the thrill just left me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't curious anymore. I was just empty." The detective shakes his head. "You expect us to believe that? Believe whatever you want. The truth is the truth whether you accept it or not." He folds his hands again. "And Rhonda, she was the last." The detective breathes heavily. "You're lying." "No," the man says quietly. "For once, I'm not." He leans back, and then he says something even more disturbing. "But there's something you missed." The detectives freeze. "What?" The man tilts his head. "The brother wasn't the only person who knew. A beat. Someone else helped us. Someone you've never looked at. Someone you'd never suspect. Someone still alive." The room erupts in a silent panic. The detective's heart rate spikes. "Who?" The man smirks. "Why should I tell you everything?" The detective slams his fist onto the table. "Because you owe those women the truth." The man looks him dead in the eyes. "No, I owe them silence. But you only get the truth if you earn it." He leans in again. "You want a name? Find it yourself." "And where do we start?" the detective demands. The man's smile fades. His eyes drift toward the stack of crime scene photos. He taps one. Not Rhonda's. Another. A victim from 1986. "You missed something," he says softly. "What?" the detective asks. The man taps again. "Look at her case file. Look at what was found with her." The detective quickly opens the folder. Photos spill out. One stands out. Keychain. A cheap metal souvenir. From a diner. A diner hundreds of miles away from where the victim was found. Strange. Why would she have that? The detective's pulse quickens. He shows the man the photo. This is the clue." The man nods once. "You're getting warmer." The detective leans closer. "What does it mean?" The man whispers. "He wasn't just a killer. He was a traveler." The detective stiffens. "Your brother." The man laughs softly. No, the other one. The detectives freeze. Who is he? The man's smile widens into something terrifying. That's what makes this fun, he whispers. Even I never knew his name. The detectives stop breathing. He found us. The man continues. Not the other way around. He liked our work. He gave us rules, codes, ways to avoid being caught. The detective closes his eyes. This isn't one killer. This isn't two killers. This is something else. Something bigger. Something organized. A network. Pattern. A shadow. The man continues. He was older. Smarter. For more chilling true crime stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel.